DJ PK, and we're joined now by John Brice, college sports insider for USA Today. John, good morning.
Good morning, guys. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks for coming on. We wanted to talk to you. You spent a little time in Utah, and you didn't give us a call. You blew right through town without talking to us. But, hey, you got to hang out with Kalani Sitake and write a little story about him. And you got into him and the vibe he's trying to create around the program. And I don't think trying to create, he is creating around the program.
Yeah, that's the second time that I've gotten to spend some really in-depth quality time with Coach Sitake in the last few years. The previous one was for Football Scoop, and then this most recent one for USA Today. And I've gotten to know him at some of the AFCA conventions through the years as well, and had actually bumped into him this past January in Charlotte, and then was out this way last month and reached out to BYU and asked if I could come over, and ended up spending 4 or 5 hours on campus that day. Got some time with Aaron Roderick as well, but just always struck by the authenticity of Kalani Sitake.
Yeah, that's a very good word, because I would say genuine. You know, we've been doing this radio show for 25 years, so we're veteran guys here. And before that, for 14 years, I was the beat writer at the Salt Lake Tribune, and I covered these guys when they were players. And Kalani was that way as a young man, and he's certainly this way as an older man. The word genuine comes to mind as far as that goes. You know, I'd tell you a little story about him that when he was up at Oregon State for that brief time, and they Bronco Mendenhall took off, so it was obvious because of the religious connection that Kalani was going to be a top candidate, right? And so, you know, people were texting him and wanting to get his word on it, but, you know, he had to be low-key. Well, that season, which is in December, the time of year, Christmas Day, he gets in touch with me and tells me, hey, sorry, man, I couldn't get back to you, but I just want you to know, you know, I value our friendship and look forward to working with you. Blah. And I get it, man. I've been in the business for years. I know you got to be quiet, but this is a little anecdote of his interpersonal skills, which I think are off the charts, and you have obviously experienced that, and get your thought on how that genuine and authenticity, as you say, is actually helping him build a really good program.
Yeah, you know, I've gotten to spend time with a bunch of different coaches around the sport this spring, particularly some first-year guys in the SEC and at the University of Memphis, and then Kalani certainly being a veteran. And I think that authenticity and that genuineness, as you put it, is critical in this era, because as a coach told me this past week at a symposium in Atlanta, he was like, I can spend 10 minutes watching an AI video and not know it's AI. My players will know in 10 seconds. And so I think players are really smart right now. They know real from fake, and Kalani Sitake is real. And just briefly on that anecdote note, I'm one of the people who saw Kalani in general boarding talking to people, just talking to random people, because I talked to him in general boarding, getting ready to get on a flight cross country recently. And so because of that, you see that, and I was blown away when he gave me that quote that, you know, sometimes I'm sad when I see them put their AirPods in because I want to have a conversation with them. No coach does that. No coach does that. I'm at these conventions, and these guys are flying the university jets in or booster jets in, and they're getting in and out as quickly as possible. Kalani's standing in a line 10 deep with a crowd of Utah high school coaches talking to him as he prepares to fly back cross country into Salt Lake, no less, not even Provo. And Provo's got a great airport.
Yeah.
You get to interact with you know, coaches in different leagues and all that, and a lot of coaches, some coaches probably don't value this at all, so set them aside. But there's probably other coaches who do, but it's not necessarily easy to create this and then sustain it. So I'm interested in your experience interacting with other coaches. What can be done to sustain it, and why does Kalani do it, and how many other people are doing this? I mean, it's never going to be exactly the same, but how many people are in the same ballpark as far as creating this type of attitude around a program?
I would say Kalani Sitake and Marcus Freeman are two at the very tip top who have created and honed an authentic culture that is lasting and that is rooted in substance. And I think that's the biggest key. The sport, as you guys well know, has never been more transactional. And because of the way that those programs are rooted in reality and in realness with one another, I think that positions them. I think that Kalani said it in the story. Like, we pay guys. We're happy to pay guys. They should be paid. We're never going to be the highest bidder. We will not get in a bidding war. Notre Dame is probably a little more aggressive in how much money it's spending overall, but it also values culture and will stop the bidding if it feels like a guy is going to be disruptive. So honestly, right off the bat, those are two of the top ones. Matt Campbell had a very similar culture at Iowa State. We'll see if it will translate to Penn State University. But those are really the ones that stand out to me. I'm not sure how much genuine culture is out there. Kyle Whittingham had it to a large extent at the University of Utah. Now he's challenged with building the same thing again at the University of Michigan. But when I was doing the story and when I was talking with people again over the weekend in Atlanta, then what really resonated with me is that, and I've spent a lot of time around Marcus Freeman, because when I'm not out in Utah, I'm in South Bend, and Kalani Sitake talked to me about Marcus Freeman, and I see a great number of similarities in those two gentlemen.
Also, too, you said you spent some time with Aaron Roderick. I don't want to go into detail, but I think the loyalty factor to Kalani is literally the number one reason why Aaron Roderick is at BYU, a veteran play caller who has had opportunities to leave, but his connection to Kalani keeps him there.
Yeah, I think you're 100% correct. We talked about that very component, and he talked about his loyalty to Kalani, and he made it clear in a smaller separate piece that my editors published yesterday about how grateful he was to continue working for Kalani, but to continue working for Kalani at BYU. And in my role, again, previously at Football Scoop and now at USA Today, I deal with agents a lot and college coaches' agents, and those two guys have turned down a lot of money. I'll just put it that way. Kalani Sitake and Aaron Roderick have turned down a lot of money through the years to stay loyal to BYU. I think it's refreshing. The sport needs more stories like that.
You make the point about the players' very finely tuned antennas, right? And they can get the fake from the genuine. But at the same time, players don't tend to turn down a lot of money. How valuable is this attitude that they've got at BYU, they got at Notre Dame, maybe they had it at Iowa State and Utah, now they're going through their own coaching changes there. How valuable is that in recruiting, and how much of it just comes down to dollars and cents? And does this just come down as like a tiebreaker when the bids are about the same? How much does it matter? Because you got playing time out there, you got whatever parents or coaches are exerting influence with their own interests and agendas.
Yeah, I think it can be a little bit more than a tiebreaker. Can it cause a guy to give a hometown discount? I think so. I think it can, maybe for a guy who's contemplating going into the portal after his first or second year and ends up staying and probably ends up taking a little less money to stay in order to continue to be a part of it. I think this is where BYU and Notre Dame separate themselves a little bit because of the value of the degrees, and they're both global brands in my opinion. And the BYU Comm School, the BYU Business School are really, really powerful engines, and Notre Dame certainly has its business school and prepares a lot of people for law school and medical school as well, and just the value of that Notre Dame degree. So I do think that it's a little bit more than a tiebreaker. I think there are different regions of the country that it's far more strictly transactional. And, I talked with a guy last week for a story we're working on to preview the college football season who lost a linebacker in conference. And the money there would blow your mind because this was not one of the power leagues, and he lost a linebacker to a rival in conference for $500,000. And the head coach said the kid called him as soon as he left the other coach's office, and he said, "Well, I hoped you signed it before you called me." So there is still some authenticity and some realness there when these guys are dealing with one another, even as they're preparing to lose them. But I do think culture matters, and I do think when you look at the overall roster turnover, and maybe it's a study later this year or maybe it's a study in a couple of years, Notre Dame and BYU have not had as much roster churn as a lot of their peers.
You obviously have a familiarity with Notre Dame, and a lot of people here certainly are looking forward to Saturday, October 17th in Provo, Utah, Lavelle Edwards Stadium, thinking that obviously that's when they play BYU and the Notre Dame game. And who knows what's going to happen, but there's an opportunity at least for both teams to be undefeated and have it be the game of the week, blah, blah, blah. Could you give us some insight into what you're expecting out of Notre Dame this season?
Yeah, I just turned in my USA Today preseason top 25 ballot. I had both Notre Dame and BYU inside of the top 10. I will be at that game on the 17th of October. I'm extremely excited to attend and cover that contest. I think it will be one of the preeminent matchups in college football this season. I think Bear Bachmeier is really poised for a giant next step. I think he was kind of a raw athlete who just made plays because he's a heck of a football player last year. I think he will take a step this year as a more complete quarterback. Notre Dame is going to lean on the right arm of C.J. Carr, who I think will have an opportunity to go pro after this season. And then I think the Notre Dame defense will be one of the very best in all of college football. But I really like the Glasgow guy at linebacker for BYU. I think BYU's perimeter skill is slept on a little bit, and certainly L.J. Martin is an elite running back. So I think it will be one of the best games in college football this year. I think the week before I'm at Georgia, at Alabama, and then I get Notre Dame, BYU, and the week after that I maybe get Indiana, Michigan. So I'm going to have a pretty blessed October.
Nice.
John Brice, College Sports Insider for USA Today, joining us. In your story on BYU and Kalani, you did reference the scandal at Texas Tech, and I'm curious how far you think they're going to fall. Arizona State did go 7-2, and they got in the conference title game. It was a four-way tie at 7-2, and they won the conference title 2 years ago. Obviously, they're the only team that beat Tech last year. Utah and BYU aren't on Tech's schedule this year. Is there a team or two out there that can take Tech down and keep them out of the title game, or should we just pencil them in?
No, I definitely think that Tech has its work cut out for it. I think the Red Raiders will be really good on defense, and I like Joey McGuire. I think he's been put in a pretty untenable situation by that whole sordid saga. But I would not remotely pencil or pin Texas Tech into the Big 12 championship game. I know in speaking with some coaches, including some here in the Utah area, that they expect a big jump out of Central Florida this year. I'm not quite that far, but I do think the league is going to have some really quality teams. I know Lance Leipold is really motivated to get things rolling back. I like what Arizona returns in some key spots. Certainly, I think Utah will have a voice in it. We'll see what Devin Dampier does as he continues also to progress at quarterback. But no, I mean, BYU is my preseason favorite in the Big 12. BYU is the only team from the league that I put inside of my top 10. And I think that Texas Tech will be hard-pressed to be a 10-win team this year.
And why would you say that?
Because I think that, certainly the timing and Sorsby finally waving the white flag that everyone in America knew he should wave gives Tech all summer to transition, but they're still – they were going to pay Brendan Sorsby more than $6 million to be their quarterback for a reason. And the next guy on the roster is not Brendan Sorsby. Brendan Sorsby had the NFL held a supplemental draft. I had multiple NFL people tell me he had as high as a second-round grade, and some teams might have shaved it down. Some teams might have really given him a first-round grade in a typical year, but felt like they could get him on a second-round grade had there been a supplemental draft. And so I just think for all those reasons, you're going to have your work cut out for you. And you're going to be, even with Sorsby not playing, Texas Tech has now emerged as one of the villains in all of college football. Yeah. They started that. It trended that way last year with how much money they spent. This year they're spending, again, more than $50 million on that roster. They're kind of the poster boys, and they're leaning into it of being the renegade mercenaries of college football, but they're the renegade mercenaries without the quarterback they expected. So I really think that they're going to struggle to score points, and they're going to have some issues in that regard.
You think the Big 12 can get two teams in the playoff?
Boy, that's a great question. One, I can't answer it today. If you guys want to have me back on in the fall, then maybe I'll have a better handle on it. I'm not ready to say that yet. I think there are a couple of teams that could give the Big 12, that opportunity to get two teams into the playoffs. They obviously were incredibly close last year, and had it been a 16-team playoff, I think that would have been the perfect number last year. And I think BYU is a team that would have been capable, as well as they were playing against anyone not named Texas Tech, and just sort of the physicality that they played with and the different dynamics that they had on offense. So I think it's possible. I will not sit here and tell you that I don't think there's any path whatsoever for it, but I think it's a little bit of an uphill trek.
Billionaire booster Cody Campbell has fancied himself as a reformist, I guess, if that's a word, in college sports, right? And he's taken it to the highest levels. I think the Sorsby thing really shot down his credibility, and he comes off as a Texas Tech fan first and foremost, not necessarily what's in the best interest of college football. So I think that now, from going forward, whatever he says, I'm going to view a little more skeptically. What do you think of that?
I think that's fair, and I certainly understand that. I've got some of my colleagues that know Cody much, much better than I do. I will say I think that he truly does want to see college sports preserved and wants to see a more uniform playing field. But until that time occurs, then I think he's plenty happy to lean into it and completely exacerbate the problem. And it's almost like what you kind of alluded to is the hypocrisy of his words and actions are almost to underscore the hypocrisy of where college athletics are right now.
The University of Michigan is going to be getting a lot more attention in the state of Utah. There'll be some people rooting for the Wolverines. There'll be some people rooting against the Wolverines, but I don't think people are going to be able to take their eyes off Kyle Whittingham. And obviously his staff has not only former Utes, but obviously the Cougars defensive coordinator in Jay Hill, who played at Utah. Where do you think Michigan fits in the pecking order in the Big Ten?
Yeah, I think they've got their work cut out for them. We'll see what kind of step forward Brice Underwood can make. We'll see how much Whittingham and company can do to kind of protect him and not put as much on him. I think that this will certainly be an exponentially better coached Michigan football team than what we saw a year ago or even the previous year under Sharon Moore. From all the people I've talked to, matter of fact, somebody on Whittingham's current staff told me point blank, quote, "It's a miracle these guys won any games last year as dysfunctional as this place was." So that gives you an idea of kind of what Whittingham and company walked into. He's the perfect steadying force, I think, for Michigan, and can lead them for the next 4 or 5 years and kind of through a critical transitional period. But I think they're way down. Oregon and certainly Ohio State I would have well above Michigan. USC believes that it has by far its best team of Lincoln Riley's 5 seasons, now going on to 6, I guess. So all of those teams are ahead of them. Where does Penn State shake out now with Matt Campbell? What kind of first-year impact can Pat Fitzgerald have at Michigan State? Michigan State's going to be well behind Michigan, but I would have a hard time having Michigan above 4th in my own personal Big Ten rankings.
John, we appreciate the time. Thanks for coming on and hitting on a variety of topics this morning. We appreciate it.
No, grateful. I'll be at Big 12 Media Days next week in Frisco, so I hope to meet some of you guys in person.
Yeah, we'll
All right,
be there.
thank you, John. John Brice, College Sports Insider for USA Today. DJ and PK coming up at 9 o'clock. The long-awaited return of Larry the Laker. LeBron is done in L.A. What does Larry think of that? And where do the Lakers go from here? And how badly does he want Kessler? Talk Lakers with Larry the Laker, who ought to be fired up and entertaining. That's 10 minutes away. Stay with us.